Hey everyone, this is Jen and you're watching BPD Woman. On this channel, I will help you learn how to live more effectively with your borderline personality disorder. It is my goal to help you better learn why you feel the way you do, when you feel it, and why you feel it so intensely. My aim is to help you live a more effective life and achieve your life goals, whether they are in love, career, relationships, financial stability, whatever they may be. Using my own personal experience and anecdotal wisdom, along with traditional DBT skills that were developed by Marsha Linehan, I will help guide you through the BPD realm. I have let the animals in the room again today, so I have one of the dogs and one of the cats sleeping behind me. I am not a therapist, a life coach, a PhD, but I can answer one important question that most of those folks cannot, which is, what is it like to live with borderline personality disorder? I was diagnosed over 20 years ago, and since then I have made a committed effort, both financially, physically, spiritually, learning about my BPD, attending 3 to 5 different rounds at least of DBT classes, intensive therapy. I have every book, every major workbook, and I've read them and reread them. So if you do have BPD, congrats, because you do have one of the most highly treatable, most recovered personality disorders of the 15 that exist. So if that all sounds good, please hit subscribe and the bell below so you never miss a video. I produce about 3 to 5 each week, always something different. And I also take your suggestions as well. So please hit me up if you have a topic that you'd like me to chat about. So today, I'll be looking at some notes here. Today, I want to talk about a very probably touchy subject for many of us. Now, keep in mind here, I'm 40 years old, 41, no, I'm 41. I'm 41 years old. And when I was diagnosed with BPD in my early 20s, I was still pretty financially unstable. I was an emotional wreck. It was hard. I had a boyfriend at the time. He was very solid in most respects. And so I did have someone to live with. But if you're starting out, I want you to keep in mind through this discussion today that you don't have a lot of money probably. You probably don't have a place of your own. You may be still borrowing mom or dad's car. And if you're trying to recover from BPD or some of your problematic behaviors or CPTSD, then you may be limited in how often you can keep a job or go to work. And so you have financial instability, which keeps you held back from getting your own car or getting your own place. So on and so forth. So today I want to talk about something that's important to me, and I think it has been absolutely instrumental, and I really do believe this in my BP recovery. It's probably the one thing that has given me the most success in my recovery outside of things like DBT and therapy and skills. And that is, I don't speak to my parents. Not at all. I don't email them. I don't call them on the phone. I don't text them. They don't even know where I live. I think they know the state I live in, but they don't know where I live. And they haven't known for several addresses now. I haven't spoken to my father since, it's probably been about 2005 now. So 15 years. And my mother, I haven't spoken with since now about 2014, so about 6 years. So this, like I said, this will probably be a little bit of a triggering topic or a controversial topic, but for me, not being connected to them has helped. And I'm going to talk about why I cut them out. I'm going to give you examples of what happens if you stay connected to your family. And then, of course, I'll talk about things such as, instances where you may want to consider keeping them in your life. So let's get going. So, the main goal for me and most likely for you is you would like to lead a more effective life. And that means, less emotional ability. You want to be triggered less. You want to be able to use skills. You want to be validated. You know, it's disheartening to use the skills that you've put a lot of hard work in learning for somebody to shoot them down, right? Oh, you don't really feel that way. Oh, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Stop crying. What are you crying for? Don't be ridiculous. Oh, here we go with the waterworks again. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Those kinds of statements are abusive. So one of the main reasons, and I'll preface by saying that, you know, in my 20s and into a little bit of my 30s in regards to my mother, sweetie, don't do that. And in regards to my mother, I did go back and forth at times throughout the years going in to see my parents, and I knew this might happen. It's just going to be distracting for me. Okay, very good. I did go back and forth between having them in my life, not having them in my life. And so this wasn't a decision that I made, boom, I woke up one day and then I was able to stick with it. There was a lot of back and forth. And I just produced a video about the flip-flop game. So check that video out when you are looking at this video today, because that may help understand for you why you keep going back and forth. So the main reason why I live several states away from both of my parents and why I don't have contact with them, and that also means that I don't have contact with my extended family. You know, the one person that meant a lot to me, my grandmother, she passed away about 12 years ago now. So I am not literally connected with any of these folks. I'm not on Facebook or Instagram. They don't have my email. So literally when I say there's no family, there is no family. And I know that's difficult and I know that's hard. But listen, let's stick to this, because it does actually make me feel better in the end. And here's why. That's actually another note that I'd like to talk about. All right, sorry about that. Sometimes I think of something and I want to mention it in the video and I write it down. So you want to break away from your parents. At least I want to break away from my parents, because when you grew up with them, their behavior became normalized. You learned that yelling, screaming, ignoring you, mom's drug use, dad's beating, whatever trauma or family life that you grew up in, that became normalized for you. And it had to. That's how you survived. And when you left the house, or maybe you're still in the house, but when you left the house when you were 19, 20 years old, I was like out of there right away. Like at 18, I went to college, I never came back. But when you are out of the house suddenly, you're not suddenly a well-adjusted person that's, capable of having stable interpersonal relationships and like having strong emotional baselines. That's not what happens. In fact, when I got to college, I spiraled. I like would see a bunny in the woods and I would like burst into tears. I would go to class and I would feel super anxious. I felt untethered. It actually got a little bit worse when I was out of the house. But I needed them for things for a while, right? Like they were helping pay for some of my college education. They were, I didn't know how to change a flat tire. Like I didn't know how to call AAA. Like I needed them at times. But when you stay connected to those behaviors, you repeat those behaviors. You repeat those choices. You get stuck in their negative thinking or their distortions. You continue to allow them to invalidate you. And then when you're out of the house, you now repeat these behaviors. You repeat these relationship choices. You've seen it, right? Like, it's a common theme, like, the woman always marries the version of her dad, or the guy always, seeks out a woman that's just like his mom. Well, if your dad or mom is a really great, solid person and they're not abusive, that's perfect. Seek that person out. But if you're like me, your mom was a drug addict who had bipolar, she has BPD, left pretty much untreated, well into her 40s and 50s was still abusing drugs. And my father, who is an abusive narcissist who like literally almost killed my mother with his hands. Those are not the type of people I would like to be hooked up with, but it's happened. It's happened. And it takes a long time to understand why those behaviors and patterns repeat themselves. And you can't unconnect from those behaviors or patterns if you're still dealing with them on a day-to-day basis with your parents or whatever. This could apply to any toxic family member. So staying connected to them keeps you from being with the kinds of people that you want to be more like. People who are reliable. There's one of the cats. Hello, darling. People who are reliable. People who, validate you. People who show up when they say they're going to. People who don't gaslight you or play mind games with you. People who don't abuse drugs or alcohol. Like, these are the kinds of people that you want to link up with. At one point I made a list for myself, and I still have it. The ideal kinds of people I want in my life. What does that look like? What does my ideal partner look like? Someone who is reliable, someone who doesn't drink very much, someone who is not a macho, like an aggressive kind of guy, right? Like, you still may be attracted to those things, but chemistry is not always a good thing. A chemistry is certainly just an indication saying, hey, this is familiar to you. Like, why don't you get connected with it? So you have to be able to like pull that in a little bit and look. Okay, what are the patterns here? What do I want, and what are they presenting? So into my early 20s, I was spiraling more and more. And when I actually left home, that's when the cutting started. That's when the severe alcohol abuse started. That's when the chain smoking started. I was confused as to what was going on with me. And it was about this time that I actually became diagnosed with BPD. I was admitted into a psychiatric hospital, and it was one of the best things that could have happened to me. And they slid me a little pamphlet. What is BPD? And I was like, oh shit, like this is me, this is me, this is me. Now, needing to cut them out was essential to me getting better. They didn't support me fully. Sure, they picked up the phone. Okay, sure. My dad gave me some money every now and then. Yeah, but they weren't present parents, right? They weren't emotionally present. They were wrapped up in their own negative, toxic patterns and still denying me. My father, this is what he would say. Well, I'm sorry you think that happened, right? But like, then if I would recall another memory from the same time period in my childhood that wasn't negatively reflective of him, he'd be like, oh yeah, no, that happened. Oh, okay. So I remember this good part about you, but you're saying that the traumatic thing that is seared into my memory that I could never forget, I'm wrong about that? I don't think so, my dear. I don't think so. So this continued to go on. My mother would, be in crying fits. And at some point, I stopped seeing them as parents who I wanted to be there for Christmases and holidays, that I wanted them to be present at my wedding, that I wanted their support. And I started to see them more as adults who were abusive and who continually let me down. And if you look at your parents or whatever toxic family member that you're thinking about while listening to this video, think if they weren't related to you, would you keep them in your life? I mean, think about that. So this also extends to the rest of my family. So my father's family was pretty small. He had one brother, and his parents died in 1984, and my grandmother died in 2005. His brother died in about 2006 or so. So there wasn't a lot of extended family on his side. So that was pretty easy for me to be disconnected from. Now my mother is one of 9 siblings, okay? So, and I'm the first of about 30 grandchildren. So there is a huge extended family. I'm sure there are relatives that I have now that I don't even know about. And I'm not on Facebook. And I recommend, if you are trying to disconnect yourself from people, don't take a 1-week Facebook break, take a permanent Facebook break. I mean, I'll produce another video here at some point in the future about BPD and social media and my own personal experiences and why I got off of it. But a lot of times it can just create more trouble. Like, you may not want a family member to know something, but then you post that you got a new dog on Facebook, and now suddenly your Aunt Sylvia is, making judgments. Well, why do you have a dog, Jennifer? Like, you can't even feed yourself. So it can be problematic. It was hard to disassociate from my mother's family. I do really like and care for some of those people. However, they couldn't keep things to themselves. So secrets that I didn't want to get out would trickle back to my mother, right? Confidences that I instilled into them and I trusted them with trickled back to my mother. And then that became into a guilt trip game and this game, and I'm going to hold it against you. And it just, I remember my grandmother saying to me, well, I know what happened. Your mother told me. And this is when I was like 29 years old. Or 31 years old. I was older. And I was like, oh, because my mother told you? You don't want to follow that up with a question about asking me about what happened from my point of view? So they will still keep you connected. There's no true way to disassociate from your parents if you still have a line connected to them. Now, I cut them out at a very particular point, and again, I put a video out about how you really got your BPD, why I disagree with the experts on one key point, and I'll put up a video suggestion here. Your parents gave you your BPD. That's just science. That's just study, that's just clinical research. Whoever you spent the most amount of time with growing up, so that could be a caregiver, that could be your grandparents, that could be your parents, but primarily at the behest of your parents and severe traumatic abuse over the years, they gave you your personality disorder. And you can check that out in my How You Got Your BPD video. I won't go into that here. So I knew as I got older and older, and I knew as I burned more relationships and I became drinking more, and I had an arrest at one point, that okay, this is out of control. Like, I need to get this together. And I was diagnosed at 21 or 22 with BPD, but like, it wasn't really until I was like 24, 25, 26 onward that I tried to gain control of some of those behaviors. And it was difficult, I tried to cut them out many times, and I know that it's hard because there were things that kept me back from doing it initially. For instance, when I did get hospitalized in like 2001 and when I was diagnosed, the hospital said, is there anyone that you don't want to see? You don't want any visitors? And I said, yes, I don't want to see my father. And then who showed up the next day? My father. And he had driven like a whole state down. So they came to me and they said, the nurse said, well, your father's at the front, but he's on your like do not visit list. What do you want to do? And I was like, oh God, let him through, I guess. Because I felt guilty because he had driven. Like, then I'm going to be an asshole, right? If I don't let him through. But, then he would, when I had this turning point when I got married, I'm now divorced, but I had this turning point when I got married, I think it was in 2004, where I said to him, I was like, okay, he almost got disinvited from my wedding. I said, you can come to my wedding, but I'm going to need to move forward. I'm going to need you to admit what you did to me growing up. I gave him the opportunity. He didn't take it. He didn't. And he was about 45, 46 years old at that time, still not taking responsibility for his life. And I'm like, well, sorry, like, I can no longer live in this invalidation. Like, you are telling me that you didn't beat me or my mother? No. How could I possibly entertain a connection with you? There's just no way. So, and my mother the same way, Over the years, I had to become her mother. I was her mother over and over and over again. Oh, she's hospitalized again, right? Oh, my grandmother's calling me with another medical drama. Oh, you stole grandpa's, pain medicine. Like when he was dying, she stole his morphine. Just sick shit. So with this further constant denial and invalidation and being subjected to all these toxic behaviors, I just had to get out. I had to abstain. You know, if you've ever been through AA, which I have, I don't go anymore. I'm still sober. But if do what works for you, there's no judgments on this channel. But one of the first things they tell you is before you actually can learn the AA program and learn to abstain through the practices and the steps and the support of others around you, the first thing they say is, get the alcohol out of your house. Like, just simply don't be around alcohol. Remove all alcohol. Like, get the temptation away from you. Well, that's the same thing with the parents. You know, before you're able to get the steps of DBT and to get the skills under your belt and to be able to lead a more effective life, you're going to need to remove the things that are going to hold you back from doing that. And that's your parents. Would you be able to really recover fully from your alcoholism or conquer that behavior by spending it every day in a bar? I don't think so. I mean, maybe, but that seems counterintuitive. Right, my dear? Yes. Okay. So, furthermore, there are just some things that you can't ever forgive. You know, sexual abuse, you know, the murdering of a pet, you know, violent rage, you know, there are just, I mean, not all of these things have happened to me, but I'm just saying, like, you know, there are just some things that you can't forget and you just need to run far, far away. And yes, it is sad. It's sad not to have your parents around. It's sad not to rely on them. You know, things go through your head like, well, some parents are better than no parents, or having some people around is better than having no people around. I've been there. I get it, but it's not true. It's better to be alone and feel emotionally safe and feel like you're progressing upwards than to be like chained to this parental cement block the rest of your life that's just going to hold you down. And like I told you, you know, I did go back over and over and over again. And with my father, it was that key point at my wedding when in 2005, when he said, I never abused anyone, I never hit anyone, you must have made all of that up in your mind. I was like, door closed. And I haven't looked back in 15 years. And that's the truth. My mother, it was a similar situation in 2014. She essentially betrayed my trust in a huge way. She did something I specifically asked her not to do. That got the boyfriend I was seeing in trouble with work. It got him suspended. He broke up with me, and I said, I'll never talk to you again. And I haven't since then. And it wasn't just because that guy was so important to me. It was just because I began to see my parents as a liability rather than a resource, right? There's liabilities and then there's resources. And she was becoming a huge liability in my life. And even when I would go back to them over and over, it always left me feeling worse for wear. I still feel terrible. I don't feel good. They make me sad. I'd have an interaction with them and then I would like be in a crying spell for 3 days. I'd have to call out of work. You know, I'd cut myself. You know, I'd get in an argument with someone else. Like I'd break off a friendship because I didn't know what was going on with me. And I was just so dysregulated all of the time with these people. And there's a reason that they're dysregulating, because they gave you BPD. Okay. I know that still creates a little bit of controversy, but I'm only speaking from my own experience. Another point I want to make here is that if you're looking for reasons or proof that this does work or doesn't work, I can tell you that of my mom's 8 other siblings, she's one of 9 children, essentially all but 2 or 3 of them stayed within the same city where they grew up. So they had their kids there. They didn't leave there. And guess what? Those people that stayed in that vicinity, they all have a lot of problems. We're talking about, you know, hooking up with spouses that are drug users, those with gambling problems. One of my aunt's ex-husbands of like 15 years, of who they had 3 kids, stole all of their savings. She has no idea even to this day what happened to it. Gambling addiction, we think. You know, my aunts and uncles have passed on their ineffective behaviors and their personality disorder behaviors to their children. It's a fucking hot mess, right? So if you're in it, you know, you got to break out of it to grow. And the examples that I just gave of my parents, siblings, and family members staying in the same city is proof positive that, like, yeah, like, it's hard to break away, but do you think maybe your life would have turned out differently had you stayed or left? Excuse me. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have a relationship with your parents or your family. Ultimately, that decision is up to you. I'm only telling you what worked for me and what my 2 thoughts on this is. But ultimately, you'll have to ask yourself, is this healthy for me? You know, you could probably modify your interactions. You know, maybe if you want to keep your parents in your life, but they can still be problematic and you're trying to get well, maybe you can just see them, I don't know, once a month, all right? Or you set like, okay, I'm going to talk to my parents for 10 minutes a week on the phone, and that's it, right? Like, you can set healthy limits for yourself. I did another video about boundaries, right? And am I allowed? Am I allowed to ask for things? Yes, you are. You're allowed to assert yourself. Check out that video. But you will have to ask yourself, you know, questions that can help you make these decisions are these family members admitting their faults? Are they being abusive still? Have they apologized to me? Are they making an effort to become better people? Are they changing their behaviors? You know, if they were invalidating to me as a child, are they still doing that now? Are they still discounting my thoughts? Are they still telling me what I'm feeling is stupid? Have they sought therapy? Have they come to family sessions with you? Have they learned more about your mental health problems? Do they seem supportive? I mean, these are questions to kind of kick around in your head. Ultimately, though, the decision is up to you. From my point of view and for my money, I would not be where I am today with my parents still in my life. 6 years ago, the last time I had contact with my mother, I wasn't living on my own. I wasn't fully insured with health insurance. I was struggling at work. I had a lot of emotional problems. I was burning friendships. And, you know, now I own my own business. I live on my own. I take care of my financial bills. Yes, we're in COVID right now, and it's a bit tougher for all of us financially, but I'm still a lot better off than I was back then. You know, now I make clear decisions and I have clear boundaries about who I let in my life and why and for how long. And I don't tolerate a lot of behaviors. And if that means I only have 2 close friends, so be it. So be it. You know, there's friends, there's acquaintances, there's people you meet here and there in life, but true friends is a different meaning. And you can reinvent your own family. And I tell you, it can be hard to separate, and, you know, your whole life changes, but for the better. And there will be difficult things along the way, like things to ask yourself, what do I do at Christmas? What about my birthday? You know, what about when grandma dies? Yes, those will be difficult things to answer to. However, you can answer to them and create a positive life. And more importantly, the bigger outcome here is for your mental health. I mean, aren't those small things worth you having a better, more effective life and being the best you that you can be? You know, I had a friend over here for Thanksgiving, and she's an only child like me. Her name is also Jen, and we were talking about, you know, our childhoods and our parents, and she said, you know, this has been like one of the best Thanksgivings I've ever had. And I said, why? And she said, oh, just, you know, no family shit. Just, it's relaxed, it's fun. Yes, you can have that. Like, you can create your own, you know. I asked somebody here in the building, I was like, oh, well, how was your Thanksgiving? And she was like, terrible. I want to move out of my house, all that family shit. Yeah, I'm just saying. Anyway, this has been BPD Woman. We have been talking about why I have disconnected from my family and why that helped my BPD recovery. If you are interested in learning more and keeping informed, please consider subscribing below. Until next time, in everything that you do, please be effective. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.